Kia ora. Thank you, Kaz, and kia ora talofa and warm greetings, everyone. Thank you very much for having me today. I'm very excited to take this session with you and hopefully trigger some points of reflection. Perhaps some of the content will be things you already know, but hopefully there are some strategies at the end that you can use not only to help you personally, but also within your workplace as an organization and how we can create inclusive spaces for all. So very excited. I'll just start sharing my presentation. Let me just get that up, then we'll be underway. Awesome. Throughout the session, I just do encourage everyone to use the chat function. Just pop your thoughts, comments, or questions down, and there will be opportunities for you, I guess, to contribute to the session today. Love a two-way session, so hopefully we'll get some interaction there. So please don't be shy. And before we open up the session, just like to start with karakia to open up our space. Kia no tātou. Manawa mai te mauri nuku, manawa mai te mauri rangi. Ko te mauri kei au he mauri tipua. Ka pakaru mai te pō, tau mai te mauri. Haumi e hui e, tai ki. Awesome. So as we do, I always like to start off with who I am. So ko waio, who am I? Just a little bit about me, whānau, ko Hamo te whakapaparanga mai. So I am of Samoan descent. Ko whalesi e la le whanga me whasaota Okuhapu. So my villages are Lefanga and Whasaota in Samoa. And a fun fact, you'll see there on the screen some beaches down the middle. And those are my village beaches, and they look like that 98% of the year. So yeah, even better when you see it in person. And also you'll see there Return to Paradise. Now, there was a film, a 1953 film. I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with it or heard about it, or even familiar with the star who was Gary Cooper. It was actually filmed in our little village, all the way in kind of like the back country. So it's our village's claim to fame. So if you know the film, that's great. And if not, you can add that to your to watch list. And perhaps you'll see some of that beautiful paradise that you'll see there on the screen. Engari ko tamaki te whenua tupu. So I actually grew up here in Auckland. I'm a first generation New Zealand born Samoan. So both my parents were born in Samoa. I came over in the about mid-90s and then had 3 children, with me being the eldest, and I have 2 younger brothers. Ko whātua tua tōku mama, ko palota tōku papa. So that's my mum and dad you see there on the screen with my 2 younger brothers, and ko Dejealous Palota tōku ingoa. So if the first pronunciation that crossed your mind when you saw my name was Dejealous, don't worry, you're not alone. That's actually quite a natural response. But Dejealous is my name, and a bit about what I do at Diversity Works New Zealand. I am the consultant as part of the advisory services team. So I look after all the consultancy inquiries from all our members and also our non-members across the motu, across Aotearoa New Zealand. So I've been here for almost 2 years. Lots of exciting mahi. And as we like to say in the DEI space, or as we're reframing it now as the workplace inclusion space, there's no finish line. So that's just a little bit about me. And again, I'd just like to thank you for sharing this space with me today as we dive into cultivating inclusive workplaces. Yeah. So a bit about what we're going to be covering today. Just, I guess, start by defining diversity, equity and inclusion, or DEI for short, because let's say we have about 20 people here today, participating today, and that means potentially 20 different definitions of DEI. So really important to align these. We'll then go and dive into the big why. So why is workplace DEI so crucial? And understanding that rationale behind DEI is essential, especially you may be seeing things in the media or things that are going on politically as well. So understanding the rationale behind DEI is really essential. So it's not just a buzzword. There are really compelling reasons why DEI matters. So we'll explore those together, and then I'll cover some key topics within DEI, things like unconscious bias, in and out groups, intersectionality, perhaps some concepts you've heard before, perhaps not. We'll cover those. And again, throughout the session, I'll be just putting out some points of reflection, which hopefully can help you just take a step back and just reflect on our everyday practices. And then just to end off, we'll move on to how we can convert our awareness into concrete action. So it's one thing to understand DEI, but how do we really implement it in our daily work? What does that look like? So we'll talk about some actionable steps that both teams and individuals can take just to foster an inclusive environment. And just a disclaimer here, you're all the experts in your respective fields, and it's really crucial to acknowledge the important role that you all play. Today, my goal is not to lecture you, but rather to just take you through those key concepts of DEI to hopefully spark some curiosity and more conversation and also reflection. So you might agree with a lot of points, you might need to pause and reflect on others, but some may actually disagree with a few, and that's actually perfectly fine, because the goal of these conversations is to unpack these thoughts together. So the more we discuss, the better our understanding becomes. So DEI, what do you think it is? And I just want to put it out there. If anyone could just pop in the first thing that pops into their mind when you see the words diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI. When you see this, what pops into mind? It could be a word, a sentence, a phrase, a movie, or a story. It's up to you. If you'd like to pop into the chat, just some thoughts that that come across your mind, that just that initial thing. And there are no wrong answers here. Cultures, yeah, absolutely. Anyone else? Yeah, respect. Respect is a really big part of this. Absolutely. Kia ora. Religions, yeah, absolutely. And some of these dimensions we'll actually cover today. Difference of thinking, absolutely. That's a really key part when we talk about diversity, is just those diverse ways of thinking, and how can that bring about innovation? Boundaries, inclusions, absolutely. Thank you, everyone, for contributing there. And I guess at its core, DEI is about ensuring that everyone has a fair opportunity to contribute, grow, and really belong at work. So it's not about lowering standards or offering special treatment, which some people may be hearing in the space at the moment. But it's really about removing unfair barriers and unlocking human potential, and in doing so, really enabling full potential of organizations. So when people feel safe, respected, and valued, they bring their best thinking, creativity, and commitment. It strengthens teams. So someone mentioned there that diversity of thinking. Absolutely, it leads to innovation and supports innovation. And I think also recognizing that for those really accustomed to holding dominant space or having the loudest or only voice in the room, inclusion can sometimes feel like unfamiliar ground. But inclusion is not about losing your place, but it's really about widening the circle and gaining new perspectives, new ways of thinking that make all of us at the end of the day smarter, stronger, and just more successful together. So DEI, we like to think of it here at Diversity Works as this mechanism for really uplifting talent and humanizing the workforce and removing those unfair barriers, like I mentioned before. Fostering respect, someone put respect in there, absolutely, and psychological safety and unlocking individual potential. And it just ensures that merit is applied fairly and that talent is recognized in all its forms, because it looks different for everyone, right? So enabling organizations to really realize their full collective strength. So let's go through and have a look at these definitions. Now, this is how we define diversity. It's when we have two or more people together. So that's why we define it as the differences between people. So between the characteristics, attributes, backgrounds, and their perspectives that are shaped by their lived experiences. Now, equity, and you may have seen this image before. It's about fair outcomes for all people, and it's about removing those barriers. So I'll just share some examples that we've seen some of our member organizations have implemented, and you may actually relate to these examples and actually see these already within your workplaces. So just consider a video that you release to your teams or clients. Imagine if it only has audio, or it's similar to the left image where everyone gets the same support. If we're thinking about ways in which we can make it more inclusive and equitable, just like the right image, we could include things like audio, a sign language interpreter, closed caption. Those are just points of consideration that we can start to think about, and how we can make it more inclusive. So just ensuring that people with, for instance, hearing impairments can access the content. And another thing is, for you as organizations, it's an opportunity for you to reflect on whether all your content is accessible to everyone, taking into account both what you know and perhaps what you don't know about your audience's needs. Another example is event accessibility. So imagine hosting an event that's only accessible through stairs. This scenario is akin to the left image, so where not everyone can participate equally. So to make your event more equitable, provide alternatives like ramps or elevators if the resources permit, for wheelchair users, and for those with mobility challenges. Just start thinking about those processes and kind of sitting back and going, okay, what do we need to make this more accessible and more equitable, making sure that everyone feels included and potentially don't take their business elsewhere and feel excluded from the event. So just some really common examples that we see, that you can use just to reflect on your current practices, and it looks different for every organization depending on your people's needs. Now, remember, striving for equity is about recognizing and addressing the different needs, just to ensure that there's fair access and participation for all. So another reflection piece and another point of reflection, just think critically about your current practices. Start thinking and identifying perhaps some areas of improvement. And inclusion. So we've defined inclusion as efforts to be welcoming, to treat everyone with respect and recognize the contribution of all people. Now, there are 4 elements that we found that have led to people feeling more included. And this is research that we found in our Aotearoa State of Workplace Inclusion Survey that we did in 2023. So there are 4 main elements to people feeling included. Now, people feel included when they are, 1, treated equitably and with respect. 2, they have a sense of value and belonging. 3, they feel safe to speak up without embarrassment or retaliation. And 4, they feel empowered to grow and do their best. So those are the 4 main elements that we found in terms of the main themes in our report and our survey out to our members, in terms of what makes people feel included. And those are the 4 key elements. Now, DEI, if we were to use this garden analogy, just to make it a bit clearer, think of diversity as a garden with all kinds of flowers, plants, and trees. So each plant has unique colors, shapes, and sizes, and that contributes to the garden's overall richness and beauty. In the workplace, diversity means, having team members with varied backgrounds, skills, and perspectives. So when we're talking about workplace inclusion, it's about recognizing and valuing this variety. Moving to equity, in this analogy, it's about making sure that each plant gets what it needs to grow and thrive. So some plants require more sunlight, others need more water or different types of soil. And if we were to put that in a workplace inclusion scene, it's about equity involving providing your people with the specific resources and support they need to succeed. And I guess understanding that different people have different needs. Now, inclusion's like ensuring every plant in the garden has the space and conditions to flourish, without that need of being overshadowed or neglected. And in the workplace, inclusion means creating an environment where everyone feels welcomed, valued, and able to participate in all aspects of work. So really by fostering a diverse, equitable, and inclusive environment, we can really help in every employee thrive, just like a well-tended garden. And the goal of this session is, like I said at the beginning, just to prompt some thinking and conversation. Now, DEI, if we think about it, diversity is who is at the table. Inclusion is, can everyone get to the table? And sorry, equity is, can everyone get to the table? And inclusion is, do all feel welcome at the table? So just remember, it is an ongoing journey, and each of us plays a really crucial role in creating a supportive and inclusive workplace. Now, when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, we all have stories to share, and I really want to emphasize the importance of sharing stories, because it really, if I were to go around this group, I guarantee that each of you would have your own stories that touch on different aspects of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And DEI is a mechanism for uplifting talent and humanizing the workforce, like I said before. So just take a moment to think about your story. What experiences have shaped your understanding and commitment to DEI? And a little further into the session, we're going to have a look at the perspectives and where you sit. Actually, we might actually dive into that now. So let's explore the different perspectives that individuals might have towards DEI, workplace inclusion. Now, these perspectives range from resistance to proactivity, and understanding these perspectives, it helps us navigate and support DEI efforts more effectively. So let's have a look. So resistance. So the first perspective is this of resistance. So it's the DEI is not for me. It's not for us. I just feel safe continuing what I'm doing. So individuals with this perspective may feel threatened by change or believe that their current way of doing things is sufficient. And it's really important to understand their concerns, and if we were to address it, just address them gently and start prompting some questions in terms of why they feel that way. The next perspective is curiosity. So this is starting to acknowledge the reality of the world around us and might be unsure or anxious about what increased diversity might bring. The next is this one of conviction. So here we start to see the value in diversity. So this is the attitude that I'm going to give it a go, test the waters. So this is where we begin to understand the differences that can create opportunities. And then we have the proactive perspective. So this tier is the I want to know who my people are and my environment. So this is where we start to think long term, connecting all the dots of DEI within our personal and professional lives into thought out strategies and initiatives. So just a reflection on this, I guess, is regardless of where you plot yourself on the spectrum, it's important to remember that we are all shaped by our stories and experiences. So that's why I think it's really important to sit back and think, oh, where do I sit and why do I sit where I currently sit? What experiences or what thought processes have led me to think or be seated where I am? And it's also important to understand in terms of workplace inclusion environment and DEI within the workplace, where your workforce stands in terms of where they sit on their DEI journeys and how you can support them in different ways to help them perhaps learn more. It might be an educational piece or just understand a piece of understanding of why they feel a certain way, and that's totally okay. Again, the diversity of where we sit, how we think, and our beliefs as well. It's very important to acknowledge. So it's all about that point of understanding each other and understanding the stories that have led to where we stand. Now, let's talk about a little bit what's going on now. Some of you may be very aware or perhaps unaware of what's going on at the moment in terms of DEI and the backlash, not only within New Zealand, but also across the globe, and especially in the US. There's a lot coming up from the US. So um, DEI efforts are really facing this growing scrutiny and resistance, and it's from legislative rollbacks to corporate disengagement, from performative optics to, outright hostility. The work of building fairer and more inclusive workplaces is really under pressure. But despite this, under this turbulence, there's this thing that of clarity. It's a mist of clarity, and it's that the principles of fairness, belonging, and dignity are more relevant and more necessary than ever today. So in New Zealand, I guess we pride ourselves on the shared cultural idea of everyone getting a fair go. And it's a value woven deep into our national psyche, and expressed in our love of humble determination, our suspicion of arrogance, and our belief that no one should be left behind. But fairness is not self-executing. It is something that we must continually work towards. So for those of us who are already kind of committed to advancing workplace inclusion, so those ones who are convinced and really proactive, I guess this isn't really the time to retreat, but rather a time to realign and to clarify the value of DEI and to move forward with the values of courage, integrity, and collective purpose. So, one of the most significant challenges organizations are facing and navigating right now, and you may be experiencing it as well, is this growing polarization around diversity, equity, and inclusion. So, we're seeing this clear pendulum shift, both globally and here in New Zealand, moving from a period where DEI was actively championed by governments and businesses to a landscape which is now facing increasing pushback and skepticism. So you can say that some people are facing a lot of whiplash due to this. And in the last few years, DEI was a really strong focus under the previous government, with policies, funding, all of this aimed at embedding inclusivity in workplaces, governance, and also public services. Now, with the change of leadership, we're seeing a strong shift in the narrative. And you may be hearing things like DEI is unnecessary, burdensome, or even divisive. And it really mirrors trends in the US, where businesses are coming under pressure to roll back DEI commitments in response to political and shareholder opposition. But what we are seeing is that there's actually some pushback, and we've seen that. Now let's explore a little bit about how this pushback is manifesting, and what it looks like. And I'll use some US examples. So in recently, I think at the beginning of the year, conservative organizations have really actively championed against diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives within major US corporations. And a notable example is the National Center for Public Policy. Let me get this right. National Center for Public Policy Research, which is a conservative think tank, and it submitted shareholder proposals urging companies like Apple to eliminate their DEI programs. And they argued that such initiatives may expose companies to legal, reputational, and financial risks. And in response, Apple's board recommended shareholders vote against this proposal. So they actually stood up and said, hey, no, we believe in workplace inclusion in our efforts and would like to reaffirm our commitment to DEI. So we reject this proposal. So this really emphasized the importance of fostering this culture of belonging, because organizations are really seeing the benefits of this. And so out of this, I believe they sent proposals to 25 major US corporations, and out of those 25, only six only six accepted the proposals to roll back their DEI programs or to eliminate them completely, and the other 19 refused to. So let's have a look at some examples. We've got boards here that urge their shareholders to vote against the anti-DEI proposals. So Apple, Citigroup, Coca-Cola, Costco, these are some examples of those corporations. We've also got companies who are actually actively recruiting for DEI senior leadership roles in 2025. So Adobe, Johnson & Johnson, TJX companies. This is a statement from Johnson & Johnson, and that's the case. They claim that they know that the success of their business and their ability to deliver meaning solutions depends on how they understand and meet the diverse needs of the communities that they serve. So they really, really stood up firmly against those anti-DEI proposals. And Delta Airlines, we're steadfast in our DEI commitments because we believe they are critical to our business. So really showing these organizations really showing that they believe in DEI and see that it actually is good for business. So there's also Spotify and McDonald's, who was supposedly the poster child for the anti-woke. They said, you know what, we achieved what we wanted to achieve and met our targets through our DEI initiatives. So they actually evolved their DEI efforts, which some people think, hey, we saw McDonald's rolling back. Actually, they evolved them so that it sat better within the climate in which they were operating. So again, our Aotearoa State of Workplace Inclusion Survey, we work with more, so our organisation, Diversity Works New Zealand, just a bit of context, we work with more than 600 members, and we sent out a survey, which is the Aotearoa State of Workplace Inclusion Survey. And what we found, a key critical thing was that we noted that the public sector is actually pulling back more than the private sector. And when we did a little bit of digging, it's because we found that the rationale was well established. So they established and understood the why. So you'll be seeing that as a theme around these organizations who have firmly stood against those anti-DEI proposals, is that DEI is actually really important, and we're seeing those productivity and business outcomes positively come out of it. So just a bit of context there, and just to see that what it looks like in terms of the organizations that are standing up against the backlash that DEI is facing. So I guess it segues us into why this is important, and understanding why diversity matters in organizations is really crucial. So let's outline some benefits. So the first is the social benefits. We like to call this a rationale, the rationale for DEI. So if you're looking at perhaps exploring establishing your rationale, you can start looking at some of these as to how you can build that and embed that into policies and strategies. Or also if you're having conversations amongst leadership or across the organization as a whole. So the first is, we're going to talk about 3 layers of why this is important. So the first layer is these social benefits. So the premise of this layer is that promoting diversity is the right thing to do from a societal perspective. So the key points is that fairness. Diversity helps reduce inequality through access to employment and equitable service design. Things like partnership. It fosters collaboration between different community groups and co-creation. And then we have cohesion. So enhances shared understanding and harmony amongst diverse groups. So organizations as societal players have this role of making a better society by leading diversity. Then we have the second layer, which is productivity benefits. So the premise of this layer is that leading diversity can really yield tangible positive outcomes for an organization. Similarly, what we saw in the previous slides. So increased diversity leads to innovation. So it leads to that divergent thinking, new ideas and creativity, and really enhances innovation and I guess reduces the risk in decision making by promoting buy-in and trust. We also have motivation, demonstrating care and support for diverse identities. It increases engagement and loyalty, improving team performance. So according to the Randstad Work Monitor 2025 report, so from this year, 87% of the New Zealand workers, 87% of New Zealand workers perform better when they feel a sense of belonging in the workplace. That same report indicated that 63% of employees would leave a job if they didn't feel like they belonged. So that really highlights the critical role of inclusion in employee retention as well. And collaboration, just a sense of belonging, partnership, and mutual trust. It allows true collaboration that leads to high-performing teams. So this layer tells us that diversity is not only the right thing to do, but also a smart thing to do for your organization's success. The third layer is the strategic benefits. So diversity is inevitable, and it's a consequence of societal changes, and how we see is that organizations must adapt proactively. So what are some benefits? Projecting enhanced information from a diverse workforce. It leads to better forecasting and more accurate external world predictions. Rapid adaptation to changes based on improved predictions and knowledge from a diverse workforce. Designing. So the above 2 points result in better organizational design. And at the end of the day, more sustainable organizations. So embracing diversity is the sensible thing to do based on this layer in order to stay ahead of those societal changes. Now, if we were to wrap that all up, it's that diversity is not only the right thing to do, but it's the smart thing to do and the sensible thing to do. You can see here, cultures of inclusion. How to create these cultures of inclusion? So just think about it, and another prompt for you in terms of where you sit in your organization. Think about some examples of how your team or your organization has successfully created a culture of inclusion, safety, or belonging. What are the current structures that are in place? Those could be informal or formal. Informal being just practices that you do every day that you see without no written or formal policy to actually guide that, or the more formal structures. What's written in policy? Do you have a strategy? What does that look like? And how does this actually show up within the workplace and amongst your people? So I want to quickly dive into understanding where we are now and a bit of our own Aotearoa New Zealand context. So understanding where we are now, how we got here, and how we got here is important for where we will be in the future. So just a little bit of interaction here once again. Let's just go back into a time machine and jump into 1901 in Aotearoa New Zealand in an urban centre. What do you think the workforce would look like in one of New Zealand's urban centres in terms of the demographics that you were seeing? I'd just like to put it out there. What do you believe our workforce looked like in 1901? Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. Yep, male, yes. Pākehā. Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. So I guess if we're thinking about it, I'm going to actually kind of dive into this in terms of what it feels like, what it looked like. Let's have a look. So this is what it looked like. In 1901, the workforce was shaped by long-standing societal norms and demographic traits. So most workers were white, as Māori primarily lived in rural areas up until the 1960s. In terms of gender and age, the workforce was predominantly male, young to middle age, and typically married with children. Because back then, if you were in the workforce and you were in your mid-20s or even early 20s, and you weren't married and you didn't have children, oh, how strange, something was wrong with you. These were some of the societal norms that existed at the time. Workers were mostly Christian, over 92% of the population at the time identified as Christians, heterosexual, or at least presenting to be, because homosexuality was illegal at the time, and also physically able, much to do with that heavy labor that existed at the time as well. Authority in the workplace was often held by older men because age was associated with experience and knowledge. So I guess the reason why we kind of dive back into, say, 1901 is because understanding these historical characteristics really helps us appreciate how societal norms and demographics have shaped the workforce development and how that actually evolves over time. If we were to dive into the mid 60s, into mid 1980s, we're actually starting to see significant changes in the workforce. So you're seeing the new entry of different groups into the workforce. So female workers started to enter professions, workers with diverse religious beliefs and ethnic backgrounds, different sexual orientations, older workers, as well as younger generations. But despite this diversity being present and being introduced into the workforce, the important thing to note is that the integration of these new groups wasn't always smooth. So that inclusion element wasn't always smooth. And many individuals and organizations faced resistance to these changes, and it led to difficulties in integrating these diverse groups. And so a lot of these new groups had a hard time and experience in actually integrating into the workforce. And as time progresses, we're continuously seeing this diversity growing in terms of our demographics, and an introduction of a variety of new groups. So we have transgender workers, and we're starting to see neurodivergent people, gender fluid individuals, single parents, temporary migrants. And these demographics are really important because when we think of diversity, often when we think of demographics, people always think, oh, it's all about gender and ethnicity. But no, diversity is actually more than that. There are so many different demographic or diversity dimensions that are a part of a person's identity. So things like parental status, migrant status is really important too, in terms of how we can integrate and help diverse people feel included in the workforce. Okay. In the future, new and additional categories will just keep on being introduced, and we will continuously increase this diversity. It's inevitable. It's a result of those societal changes. Okay, let's have a look here, and you'll see here some of the diversity dimensions that different people identify as, and you can start to see that. And I guess in our little village, let's explore New Zealand as what it would look like as a village of 100 people. So if New Zealand was a village of 100 people, it would look like this. The average age would be 38 years old. 64 people are European, 17 are Maori, 19 are Asian, 9 are Pacific peoples, 2 are Middle Eastern, African, or Latin American, and 1 will identify with other ethnicities. 27 people born overseas, 56 people will not have any sort of tertiary qualification, 24 people will live with some sort of disability, visible or invisible, and 9 people will be earning more than 100,000 per year, and only 4 of them, will be women. So these statistics really highlight the diverse makeup of our population, and the importance of inclusivity within our teams. And all this information is based on our most recent census. So how can understanding these demographic changes help us create more inclusive and effective workplace practices? And that's another point of reflection for you. So understanding and adapting to these changes is really crucial for fostering that diverse, equitable, and inclusive workplace that reflects the society that we serve. So that's why it's really important to have a look at our context. And if we also look at our ethnic mix, you'll see how it's evolved over time. and how there's that increase in Pacific peoples. We're starting to see this increase in our ethnic groups. So how are we as organizations going to cater for this diverse workforce that's coming in? What will our workforces look like within our organizations? Those are some things that we can think about. Okay, and again, these are some of the diversity dimensions. Now, just take a moment to have a look at the slide and perhaps identify some diversity dimensions that resonate with you and reflect on how these dimensions contribute to your unique identity. I'll just give you a quick few seconds. I wish I could, I wish I had more skill to make this tilt, make it more inclusive so that you're not bending your head upside down. But yeah, have a look what identifies with you. And this is going to be really important as we talk about this concept of intersectionality. So intersectionality is a framework for understanding how various aspects of a person's identity, such as race, gender, sexuality, ability, intersect and interact. So these all create unique experiences. And the important thing is that recognizing intersectionality in the workplace is crucial for fostering an inclusive workplace. And the reason why I showed you that kaleidoscope in the previous one is because that's actually how our unique identities work. They kind of mix and match like a Rubik's cube, constantly for each person it looks different, and you identify with different aspects of that kaleidoscope. So it really shapes a person, and sometimes a person can be shaped by multiple overlying factors, not just one, which is why it's really cool to look at that kaleidoscope and see what you identify with, and you'll actually find that there are deep layers within what creates a person's identity. So if we're talking about intersectionality, an intersectional approach really leads to more equitable and effective workplace practices when we think about how can we cater to the diverse identities that people have. So let's have a look at these examples. There's things like the intersection of gender and age, the intersection of gender, ethnicity, and disability. What would that mean for an individual? How can we support them? The intersection of gender, ethnicity, religion, and migration status. How does that affect their experiences? How can you as an organization reach out to different people and those overlying layers of identities? And perhaps it starts by reaching out in terms of finding out who your people are, because a lot of organizations don't have that context of who their people are. So understanding the different dimensions of the people through a survey or through an HRIS system, those can really contribute to your understanding of your workplace and your people within your workplace. Also, things like intersection of ethnicity, age, sexual orientation, caring responsibility, class, and migration status. What does this mean for a person? And how does intersectionality affect DEI? Well, it allows us to reflect and apply this holistic inclusion. So considering intersectionality, we move beyond this one size fits all solution for organizations and strive for more inclusive practices that recognize diverse realities of our workplace. So what if we understand DEI and realize it's important, what stands in the way of progressing this kōrero? So let's have a look. Unconscious bias. Now, this is a concept that you may know of, perhaps not, but let's dive into it. I think this part is more of a reflective piece, and unconscious bias really influences how we treat and feel about others, often without our awareness. So think of unconscious bias as being on autopilot. So we might not always realize when we've slipped into it. And our brains are automatically wired for unconscious bias, and that's due to the vast amount of information that we process. So let's look at an example from the late 1970s, I think, in the US. At that time, US symphonic orchestras were 95% male. And so to address this, the orchestras implemented blind auditions using a screen to conceal candidates' identities from the jury, kind of like The Voice, the TV show. And as a result, the percentage of female musicians in the top US symphonic orchestras. It increased from 5% in around the 1970s to 25% in the 2000s. And you might think, 20%, yeah, that's all right. That's actually a huge increase in terms of how one practice can actually lead to that increase. Or positive change. And it illustrates how addressing unconscious bias can lead to more equitable outcomes. So putting it out there, there's various types of biases that influence our judgments. So first is halo bias. Halo bias is where we let one positive trait influence our overall judgment. So for instance, voting on a politician because they're good looking or we find them attractive rather than policies. So that's an example of halo bias. The other one is horn bias, which is the opposite of halo bias. So where one negative trait affects our entire perception of someone. Then there's affinity bias. So this is the one where we're naturally drawn to people who are similar to us. And recognizing these biases really helps us to understand how they affect our decisions and interactions with others. So, as a point of reflection, I just want you all to consider how unconscious bias might be influencing your own decisions and interactions in the workplace, or even personally in your everyday lives. What steps can you take to become more aware of and address these biases? Just a point of reflection. And unconscious bias can also lead to in and out groups. So naturally, we often find ourselves categorizing people into groups. Even I do it sometimes, and that's totally human. And this is a common psychological process. So these categories help us make sense of our social world. But the issue with this is that it can also lead to stereotypes and biases. And the important thing is that when it does happen, it's important for us to step back and go, let's take a moment to reflect here and why am I feeling or thinking the way I'm thinking. So in and out groups are really fundamental concepts in understanding how we categorize people. So in groups, these are the people that we identify with and feel a sense of belonging to, and kind of the people who our brains naturally prefer or favor. Out groups are the groups we perceive as different from ourselves, or the groups we don't identify with. So this distinction can lead to biases and stereotypes. Now, the formation of in and out groups, it depends on a lot of factors, such as context, environment, and personal feelings. But let's think about it in terms of your workplace. It can work in terms of visible traits. So in groups can be based on what people look like, gender or ethnicity, but also less obvious factors like roles or functions within your organization. So stereotypes may arise from this categorization, and while there might not be any truth, it often becomes generalized, and that can lead to unfair judgments. So understanding these dynamics really helps us recognize and address these biases in our interactions. In the workplace, in and out groups can form based on a variety of factors. So it includes roles, functions, team members, reporting lines. For instance, employees in the same department or team might form an in-group, while those in other departments or teams might be perceived as out members. So it's really important to recognize these dynamics and how we can actually create more inclusive and cohesive work environments from it. So points of reflection. Think about your own experience. How have in and out groups influenced your interactions at work? What steps can you take to ensure you're fostering inclusivity? Think about some examples where in and out groups affect your team dynamics or decision making. How did you address it? So understanding these helps us navigate these social dynamics more effectively, and just being aware of those tendencies to think a certain way. And that will help you reduce bias. So think about things of, who do I feel naturally comfortable with? Who do you assume will succeed or fail? How do your biases shape the experiences of the people that you serve? Again, some more points of reflection. And now, I guess, leading towards the end of how do we make things happen? What are some strategies that we can use? And today we'll explore this thing called theory of change, which was developed internally here at Diversity Works. And it outlines how we can shift the dial on diversity, equity, and inclusion within organizations in Aotearoa. So it really helps us to understand what needs to happen to drive meaningful change in our DEI efforts. And this is using research, surveys within across the motu in order to inform this theory. So the premise is that it's a strategic framework and it maps out the steps that are required in order to achieve our goals of inclusivity. And it hopefully provides a roadmap for you as well. So the first being grow your self-awareness. So encouraging personal growth and self-reflection. And these kind of sessions, like your masterclasses, are really important as well in terms of educational pieces, diverse thinking, understanding different perspective. Those kind of things can really help grow your self-awareness and just having kōrero, not only within your own organizations, but on things like LinkedIn, where there's a lot of discussion going on. Some people you might want to participate, some others just want to be spectators. And that's okay as long as we're growing our awareness of, I guess, those diverse perspectives and how we react to them. I think that's an important thing as well, and how we can keep ourselves safe from perhaps times when people may have different thinking or different beliefs to ourselves. How do we react to that? So thinking about those strategies about just growing your self-awareness and what's going on around you. The other is learning about Aotearoa New Zealand, which is why we covered that context piece in terms of understanding our unique history, our diverse cultures, and also importantly, te tiriti relationship with Māori and the Crown. Then we can start looking at that broader context of DEI efforts across the globe and how we can, as organizations, contribute to Aotearoa New Zealand's organizational culture. The other is embrace manaakitanga. So if we implement practices that emphasize hospitality, kindness, inclusivity, then organizations will really celebrate differences and respect each other. So just about building those supportive and inclusive cultures. And encourage systems change. So firstly, it's about acknowledging and recognizing those barriers and understanding them, then taking a step back and going, okay, what are these barriers that are stopping or preventing fairness and inclusivity from occurring? And how can we equip ourselves and our organizations to combat those and to overcome those barriers? So these again are all points of reflection for you and how we can push forward to encourage those system changes. Now, I wanted to show you, you might want to, I don't know, wherever you're tuning in from, you might want to take a photo of this. This is a care model in terms of a great way for you to start navigating your inclusion journey within your organization. That first piece, so context is about understanding the environment in which we operate. Alignment is about identifying and connecting with the different moving parts in the ecosystem of inclusion in your workplace. And you can start by asking some questions like, are your leaders supportive? Do you have the support and voice of people across the organization? What resources do you have to support this work? And who are your key support networks that you journey with? So those are just some questions you can start thinking about in terms of alignment. Roadmap. So there's so much information out there, frameworks and approaches to addressing diversity, equity, and inclusion. So road mapping where you want to go is so important. So use people feedback to create a roadmap of progress. And I think it's really useful to be quite intentional with the steps that you'll take, and that will help you grow. And a big piece of this step is have milestones, pinpoint where you want to be and by when. And so that's when strategies become a really important part. And also engagement, involve your people, communicate with your people, and provide educational pieces, not only for your people, but also if you're leaders, for everyone across your organization. And just continuously ensure that you're empowering your people by allowing them to be involved in part of the process. Provide inclusive support. What will that look like? It depends on, again, going back to that first step, your context. Who are your people and what is the context in which your organization is operating in? If we're talking about personal benefits, engaging in DEI will bring about, motivation and rewards. You feel good about yourself at the end of the day, I guess, and just increasing your knowledge and expertise, and being able to learn more about different worldviews and also different perspectives is really important. And just empowering yourself to, I guess, make the world a better place. And these are some of the benefits that you'll come across if you start your DEI journey, wherever you may sit on that perspective wheel that I introduced earlier. Now, inclusion does require a new type of leader. You don't need a leadership role necessarily in your organization to be a leader. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay not to be 100%. It's okay to be uncomfortable, especially with everything that's going on in the space. But it's important for organizations to create safe spaces for everyone, and understand that differences can actually be a strong weapon. And I don't mean to make it very airy-fairy, but it really does allow us to grow. So I encourage you to stay curious, be open, to continue and to grow. And I guess it brings us, I want to show you a video. It's from Denmark, but it shows us how, the strength in diversity and how you can find unity within the diverse perspectives or the diverse identities that you may have within your organization.
It's easy to put people in boxes. There's us, and there's them. The high earners, and those just getting by. Those we trust, and those we try to avoid. There's the new Danes, and those who've always been here. The people from the countryside, and those who've never seen a cow. The religious, and the self-confident. There are those we share something with, and those we don't share anything with.
Velkommen. Jeg kommer til at stille jer nogle spørgsmål i dag. Nogle af dem kan godt være lidt personlige, men jeg håber, I vil svare ærligt på dem. Hvem herinde i rummet var klassens klovn?
Oh.
Hvem er bonusforældre?
And then suddenly, there's us. We who believe in life after death. We who've seen UFOs. And all of us who love to dance. We who've been bullied. And we who've bullied others. And then there's us, the lucky ones who've had sex this past week. We who are broken-hearted. We who are madly in love. We who feel lonely. We who are bisexual. And we who acknowledge the courage of others. We who have found the meaning of life. And we who have saved lives. And then there's all of us who just love Denmark. So maybe there's more that brings us together than we think. TV2 Denmark. All that we share.
I would typically ask everyone if they have any thoughts or anything to do with that video. But again, I think the thing that I want to emphasize there is that there's more to us than just our differences, but rather what brings us together. And I'll just try and stop sharing my screen now. I'm sorry, I realize I've gone over time. Apologies, Kaz and everyone. But thank you for staying to the end. If you do have any questions, please feel free to pop them through. Or I'm definitely my details can be sent out to everyone. I understand that we are pressed for time. So yeah, happy to answer any questions you may have, or if you need any support, I'm definitely here to be of help. So kia ora, thank you everyone for having me, and thank you Kaz also for having me today.